Good morning. My name is Kevin Panik, and I like to tell people there's no need to panic. The exits are clearly marked, and I am a professional. I think there's two paths of careers that people have, and one is where they kind of engineer their way. They have a focus, a laser focus, and they make things happen, and they get to where they want to be. And then there's the other way, which is mine, where I just kind of, life pushes me around, and I go different directions. And so I was driving a beer truck in Florida in the summer, and after 12 hours, the truck was empty, and I'm driving back to the plant, and I'm saying, I don't know if I can throw cases of beer for the rest of my life. So that's when I got serious and saved some money and went to the local community college. Fast forward, I got my degree, met a guy in the gym, and he said, you should be an engineer. So that's what I studied. I worked 15 years at Kennedy Space Center, working on the solid rocket boosters for the shuttle program, and 8 years ago had the wonderful opportunity to come to NASA and work in NASA operations, launch pad management and pad A. And the project that I would propose is, in my mind, pad A is the pad that launched Apollo 11 to the moon. So in my mind, that is hallowed ground. I mean, when you stand there, for the human, for all humankind, that's hallowed ground. And so we transferred from Apollo to shuttle. Again, a lot of things occurred at Pad A, and now we're transforming at the end of shuttle. SpaceX has got the pad now, and we're transforming so that they can launch their commercial rocket from Pad A. So my project, and I kind of ran it by public affairs at Kennedy Space Center, and they said, we're receptive to it. And I'm shooting for the stars. I just told them, I said, look, I'd be the pad manager, my SpaceX counterpart, Elon Musk and Buzz Aldrin, in a video where we fly Buzz in on the NASA helo and we land at Pad A, and we just talk about how this is hallowed ground and how SpaceX is respecting that and going to continue a legacy for humankind from Pad A. So that's the project I'm proposing. Good morning, Kevin Panik, NASA Pad Manager at Kennedy Space Center. If you have one takeaway from me today, please remember this: never, never, ever panic, as the exits are usually clearly marked. Actually, I learned so much during the course of this study. Initially, you probably recall, my project was to shoot for the stars and try to get Elon Musk and Buzz Aldrin together to do a quick YouTube video to discuss and kind of try to cement the idea that Launch Pad A, from where Apollo 11 first left in 1969, is hallowed ground. But what I realized is that's just really phase 2. Phase 1 is selling the idea to those gentlemen and to NASA Public Affairs. So the Know Your Audience side of this was critical. Actually, I'm going to probably, hopefully, be in a room with 3 or 4 people and pitching it to people that already believe that it is hallowed ground. So I need to, and I also want to, in order to sell it, sales is a difficult thing. I used to do cold calls, and for a brief time, and you don't know your audience. But so here I have a chance to know my audience, maybe play on the egos a little, because there are probably some big egos in the room. So kind of have an idea, present the idea. I thought I would need storyboards and have it all laid out so that they could either approve or deny. But in my mind, in thinking about this, that's really not the way to go. They will probably want input. If they approve it, they'll probably want to have some idea as to where it's going to steer. So just kind of go into this room with this concept and saying, look, I can tell you definitively 500 years from now or 1,000 years from now, we all agree that this is hallowed ground. So let's get that story out, and we have this window of opportunity to strike. SpaceX will probably launch their rocket in the spring of next year. So we, try to do that sense of urgency when you're selling, right? That's one of the things they tell you. So say, look, we really have to move on this. We've got to create this video so that when we're having this incredible press that's going to be global, probably when they go to launch a rocket, we can release this video, and hopefully doing it in the time of the timing of that and everything, we can get millions and millions of views, and we can start this this understanding that it's not a Stonehenge, or it's not the pyramids of Egypt. This is a living area that goes through transformations. And I don't know if any of you saw the movie Contact. It's an old movie, but Jodie Foster, they had that thing that transported in time, and that was at Kennedy Space Center. So my thought is 500 years from now, maybe there are these transportation things, and that will be at Pad A, and that will take us to wherever we want to go, and as we're reaching for the stars. Thank you.
All right, so we are representing the presentation that Ellen was invited to give to Rockefeller University's Insight Lecture Series. It's an evening a lecture. It's right before a dinner. It's for mostly professionals, highly educated, biomedical focus. The title of her talk is NASA Science, Searching for Life in the Solar System and Beyond. And so we think it's more entertainment and not so much with all the focus that she wants on science. And so take it away, Jen.
Okay. In the beginning, human beings stood on the surface of the earth, and they looked up at the stars, and they believed that the stars circled the earth, and that the earth was the center of everything. Well, since then, we've discovered that we are just a tiny blue dot in the middle of a much greater universe. And ever since we discovered that, the question has been asked, are we alone? Could there possibly be life elsewhere than on Earth? And so, ever since we started asking that question, we started looking outward. And the first thing we did was we used telescopes on the surface of the Earth. Giovanni Schiaparelli in the 1800s looked at Mars through a telescope and saw canals on the surface of Mars. And Mars has been a source of fascination since then, despite all of the other places in the universe that we could be looking and that we know that we've detected water, ice, and other elements. Mars remains fascinating because it's close. Mars is next door. Mars is attainable. And so NASA landed on Mars, on the surface of Mars in 1976 with the twin Viking rovers. And what was so amazing about the first picture sent back was how much Mars looked like Earth. If you take a look at the left, this is a picture from Viking 1. If you take a look at the right, this is a picture from the Atacama Desert of Chile. And look how similar they are. And so when we look at Mars, it's only natural that we see Earth and that we can actually imagine going there one day. And so since then, we've sent many other rovers and landers to Mars, and we've discovered that Mars used to be much more like Earth. Mars once had a thicker atmosphere. Mars once had flowing liquid water on the surface. Mars has carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, all of the molecules that make up biology. But landers and rovers have limitations, and if we're really going to search for life on the surface of another planet, we need another approach.
And that's why I'd like to step in and give you a concrete example of why landers can't do the job like humans can. And a good example of that goes actually back to the Apollo program. If you remember Apollo 11, when we overcame all these obstacles, all these technical challenges we had to miniaturize cameras, we came up with new materials, but we got Apollo 11 to the surface of the moon. At that point, it was just good enough to kind of go out, bag up some dust, gather some rocks, and bring it back. As the Apollo program continued through, we got rovers where they could leave it to us to take a car to the moon. But that's what we did, so we could strike out a little farther and get a little more information and a little more science. When we were told that Apollo 17 was going to be the last mission going to the moon for many years, people lobbied to have a geologist sent because they knew that, we didn't call him that, but it was a mission specialist. And if you think back to shuttle and that, mission specialist. So they did. We got a mission specialist on that final mission, Harrison Schmitt. It could be argued when they gathered and they went to the highlands and these areas of the moon that were really strategic, it could be argued that when they came back, that was some of the finest science from the moon from all the Apollo missions. And they drove the vehicle, they drove that car the farthest distance away from the landing point. So I hope that gives you a good example of why boots on Mars is so important, and those boots need to have human feet in them. Jenna?
All right, so we're embarking on a new adventure. We're sending humans to Mars. And anytime you embark on a new mission, you're going to face some new challenges. And some of these challenges we're pretty familiar with from our experience in space, sending humans to the moon, and their time on the International Space Station. And a lot of these are biomedically focused. So how are our bodies going to deal with the long duration space flight? So some of the issues we're familiar with, or you might be familiar with, bone loss, radiation damage. The main challenge here with sending humans to Mars is the longer duration flight. So we're talking about probably about a 2-year mission time, as opposed to, I think the longest human space flight on record is a little bit over a year, so almost twice that. So also imagine, being stuck. When was the last time you were stuck maybe in your house with your family for a long time, or last time you took a long road trip with your family? You love those people, but after a few, hours or days in the car or the house with them, you might go a little crazy. I know I do. So there's going to be so imagine you're stuck in a capsule with 4 or 5 other people for 2 years. You might go a little crazy. There's going to be some psychological challenges. And so right now NASA, with our partners on the International Space Station, are doing medical research to address some of these biomedical issues. So some of the research that we're doing involves psychological impacts of isolation and confinement, vision loss of astronauts after a long duration space flight, the immune responses after a long duration space flight, and then also how are we going to grow the food that we need for the astronauts to survive for that long of a time, to provide the right nutrition that they're going to need. And then also the exercise requirements to mitigate some of the bone loss that they're going to experience. And Vic is going to talk a little bit more in detail about some of the genetics research that's going on.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to need this. Okay, I know this is a highly educated biomedical audience, but I also understand there's some family members in the audience, so I'm going to define a few terms before I start. Personalized medicine. Personalized medicine is a trend that we expect to go to, especially for treatment of very stubborn diseases like cancer and autoimmune diseases. Another term I want to define is gene expression. This is simply when our DNA expresses itself by building protein molecules to make our bodies work. And related to gene expression is something called interconnected signaling pathways. And that's how, when a gene is expressed, there's this cascade of signaling pathways that is used to express that gene. So that's involved with that. Omics is another term. Omics, if you can imagine a hierarchy all the way from a human organism down to the individual system, like the circulatory or respiratory system, then the organs of that system, like the lungs and the heart, and then the tissues and the actual cells, and then the very lowest level is the molecules. So that hierarchy and the relationships between the different levels of that hierarchy and all the data that goes with it, that's the omics data. It started out with the genome, so the O-M-E end of genome is the O-M in omics. So at every level those are a set of omics data, and it's the relationship all the way from the top down to the bottom. When we see an effect at the top, like congestive heart failure, what does that mean at the molecular level? That's what's gotten at in the omics database. And the other item I want to define is model organisms. Model organisms like fruit flies, fish, rodents. These are all model organisms that have biological processes that are similar in the human body, like the immune response and how muscles work. So if we can understand in model organisms the molecular level mechanisms, then we can map those same biological processes into how they probably work in the human body as well. So now, let me give you my spiel. As we move forward into personalized medicine and continue to unravel the complexities that make up gene expression and these interconnected signaling pathways, it's important to have a very robust set of probing tools, especially one as powerful as the environment of human spaceflight, which will give us a rich and substantial subset of all of the omics data that will ultimately lead us to the medicine of the 2020s and the 2030s, and may also lead us to adopt some healthier lifestyles because of what we learn at the molecular genetic level. NASA's Gene Lab will host all of this omics data, not only for the Kelly twin studies and other astronauts, but also for the classical model organisms in a wide variety of spaceflight conditions, because in addition to the astronauts, we're doing experiments on all these model organisms in space. And they have controls, these experiments have experimental controls to separate the effects of weightlessness from the effects of radiation, the two main environmental changes in spaceflight. So you can see we're doing a lot of work in genetics, and we think that the Rockefeller University can be a big part of that.
Okay, so spin-offs. Spin-offs is sort of one way to think about it, is the icing on the cake, right? And I'm going to date myself a little bit. I grew up, I was a kid in the after Apollo time, and everything, if you remember then, everything was space age. It was space age this, space age that. It's because, after other people who weren't trying to get us to the moon got to look at a lot of all that technology that was created out there. They had different ideas of what we could do with it. Not just electronics, but just things, they're still happening. I mean, there's fabrics that are still things that evolved from space that are out there. And so I found this little image out there, the phrase, the catchphrase that's on a NASA website. There's more space in your life than you think. That's just fabulous. That's a wonderful statement, and I think you could talk for a long time just about that one statement. But what does it really mean? I mean, Vic talked about medical stuff. I mean, it's just almost unimaginable the kinds of advances in medicine that could come from what we have to do to make a Mars trip safe. And then, again, technology, okay, the computer on the Apollo command module, I think it was a 4K memory. Think about what that is. That's the writing on a piece of paper is 4K almost. It'll just keep going, and then just listed some examples here. I don't have to read them to you, but this other chart that's on the NASA website, it says the economic boost of NASA's investment is estimated to be 7 to 14 times. So for every dollar spent on NASA's budget, it's $7 to $14 impact on the U.S. economy. And just that number should incentivize people to do this, because that's a great return. Talk about the impact this country has by investing a little bit of money in a space trip. So I think we're ready to wrap it up.
All right. So, go one more slide here. All right, so one challenge we had in looking online to really understand our audience is that we didn't know if there was any specific research being done at the Rockefeller University that we could tie something specific that we're doing at NASA or encourage some kind of collaboration. So that's how we're, I guess we leave that to Ellen. We tried to reach out to them. We hadn't heard back. So try to really understand if there is some links there. Is she trying to encourage some collaboration? Is she just trying to inform? Some of that wasn't real clear in what she wanted to do. So we wanted to leave them with kind of the inspiring message is that there's a lot of really profound and unanticipated things that come from the research they're doing, and the unknown really applications of it in what we need to send people to Mars and do space flight. And so we want to be able to link that to things that are beyond. And just a last side note, Jim Green was here actually in April, and he gave a really nice talk about, since her thing is life in the solar system and beyond, about all the places in the solar system that we have found water. And Jen talked about, why we use water as our kind of marker for life and trying to find it. And so if she can talk to him about getting, he might have some slides and stuff too that she can reference. So that's it.